What's up, everyone? This week on the pod, I got Jeff Banks from Visual Discrimination and the Chorus of Disapproval. It's a nice long interview. We get into everything, and Jeff was a super awesome guy, real generous with his time. So stay tuned for that. Also, this Friday, the day is upon us, motherfuckers. It is the pre-order date for the new Retaliate LP called 4. You got to go to indecisionrecords.com and handle business. Order a bunch of copies for your friends and family, and maybe even treat yourself to a test press. What's up? Please support the podcast. Subscribing to it is the best way, and telling your friends, and writing about it on social media, or texting your buddies. You know, that's what you got to do. Please like it, rate it, review it, wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, if you want to go the extra mile, you can go to patreon.com/185 miles south. Become a monthly Patreon. $1 gets you behind the paywall. If you can hook it up with some more, that's sick. But there's basically a bonus podcast. I'm trying to do it for every single interview episode. So, this week we got the Jeff Banks interview is obviously today. And there'll be a Patreon episode where I have a couple buddies on. We talk about the interview. We go through his discography. And those are my most favorite pods to do. I think it's the best material we do. So go to patreon.com/185 miles south. Check that out. And let's get on with the pod.
"185 Miles South", a hardcore punk rock podcast.
What's up, everyone? This week on the pod, we have Jeff Banks from Visual Discrimination and Chorus of Disapproval. How you doing, Jeff?
I'm good, Zach. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. So stoked to have you on. We're branching out a bit. The pod started doing mostly Oxnard area and San Diego, and then I've done a lot of the people that I wanted to do, and some of the San Diego people I want to do in person, but it's just a weird time. So I've had a lot of fun doing some of the bigger Orange County figures, and I love like both these bands, and you're a perfect dude to do, I think. So thanks for taking the time.
Oh, I sure appreciate you thinking of me. And to tell you the truth, I may love the fact that you've interviewed a lot of those Oxnard guys as much, maybe even more than yourself. So I love your podcast, and I just, and to be considered with some of the folks that you've interviewed is thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. How did you get into punk and hardcore?
Well, there's a couple of different things going on at the time, but I guess it would have been around 80-ish. Would have put me in about 5th grade, I suppose. We had a store I grew up in a town called Cerritos. I lived in Long Beach as a little kid, and then we moved out to Cerritos. And in Cerritos, which is Southern California, it's near La Mirada, Norwalk, Artesia, Long Beach, La Palma, and then you start getting into the Orange County cities. It's the last city in Los Angeles County, runs right up to Orange County. Anyways, we had this record store called Best Records, and it was awesome. I mean, it was just the greatest punk rock record store, especially for its time. It just had everything. So we would go, it was over by the Cerritos Mall, and we'd go eat or, do whatever. And I would always cut out about 15 minutes before we would finish eating, and I'd go over to Best Records and just kind of check it out. And what I did is I picked up the Jealous Again Black Flag EP. And that was kind of my starting point. And then I had a friend named Jeff Birkenkamp who I went to school with, and he was getting into the Ramones, and but from that Black Flag record, I kind of worked my way backwards to the Ramones a little bit. I was never a diehard Ramones guy, but I I like the Ramones okay. I was head over heels for that Black Flag record. But as time was kind of going on, I was still listening to the Beatles and all kinds of that stuff. I was very lucky. Years ago, when I was a little guy, my dad, to supplement the income, would sell stuff at the swap meet. And this is in like 74, 75. So I was probably like 5 or 6 years old. And so we would do like the Long Beach swap meet, the Paramount, that circuit. And before we would set up, my brother, who was 2 years older than me, I don't know why he did this, but he would go around to other swap meet stands before, the place was open for business, and he accumulated first press Beatles records. So we had like a whole Beatles collection. So that was kind of my first taste in the music, and I would listen to that stuff, and just, so from then until I got that Black Flag record, I was just obsessing over the Beatles, and I had access to them. And then, Van Halen and all that kind of stuff. As time went on, probably about 1980, 81, there were some families down the street. A couple doors down, we had the Silvas. 2 doors down from them, we had more Silvas. And they were all cousins. Across the street from them, we had the Torres family. And then down the street from them, we had the Estrella family. So, and the Silvas had they were the ones that had the swimming pool in the neighborhood. So I was always, going over there and going swimming and all this kind of stuff. Well, one night, and this is probably, I guess, 81, 82, I'm riding my bike just kind of down the street, and I hear this loud, it's like loud, kind of grumbling. So I ride down, and it's coming from the Silva's house. And it was Ramiro and Alfredo Silva, were the brothers that lived there. And it was just this blaring music that sounded kind of like that Black Flag record that I had. Yeah. I'm like, man, so I'm kind of riding my bike in circles, just listening for about 10 minutes, and this car pulls up, and this girl gets out. She seemed older. She was probably like 16, but she seemed much older to me. And she gets out with this guy who was dressed like what is it? The guys from Clockwork Orange, like a Droog or whatever, with the derby hat and the Doc Martens and the suspenders and stuff. Right. He gets out, and I'm riding my bike around, and she says, hey, who are you? And I says, oh, I'm Jeff. I live down the street. And she says, do you know these guys? Do you know this band? And I go, well, I know Ramiro and Alfredo live here. And she just kind of ceremoniously announces, I manage this band, right? She's like all of 16. And then my guy gives me a business card, and he says, I'm the singer of this band. He hands it to me. And I look at it, and you're going to love this. I look at the name of the band, and it's Retaliation. Not Retaliate, Retaliation, right?
All right.
And I'm like, oh, God, this is like, that's like the greatest name for a punk rock band ever. And she says, why don't you come inside? I'm like, okay. So I walk in, and dude, I was like, I walk in, and there's Oscar Estrella on one guitar. There's a guy who I later learned was a guy named Jack DeBon on the drums. And then Ramiro Silva is on the other guitar. And Ramiro was just a few years older than my brother. And I'm looking at him, and he's got, he's just straight. He's got like his Vans on and some 501, just faded kind of jeans, and like a sex wax, the GNS shirt or whatever, he's just like all surfered out, and he's playing like a Strat copy, and the chord is just one of those curly chords into one of those yellow DOD overdrive boxes coming through some amp, and he's just ripping out these riffs. And it was just so stripped down and so just awesome. It was like Ramiro Silva was playing a freaking guitar in this loud music that sounds like the Black Flag, right? And all this is kind of processing this. And at the same time, Oscar's like, "Hey, Jeff," and he was several years older. He had a Charvel Star from the San Dimas factory. I later learned, so he had this like incredible guitar. And this also, I don't know if you can tell, but this also started the night my small career in obsessing over guitars and accessories and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I remember everything about that night. Oscar had a Charvel. He was playing through a 410 Lab Series amp. And then Jack DeBon, I'm watching this drummer, and he's incredible. And all of these guys, I knew them, and I walked in, and it wasn't like they were just cool. They took me seriously. I was a little kid. They took me seriously, and they were nice. And it wasn't like, okay, you've seen enough, get out of here. It was like, yeah, dude, hop up. They had, I remember the washer and dryer were out just in the garage. So I kind of hopped up on the washer. I was kind of watching these guys play. And man, that night, and Ramiro Silva set up with the one stomp box, and just that just became the blueprint for for my visual and what I perceived punk rock to be. And then those guys turned me on to, like Devo and all that kind of stuff, but they also turned me on to the X, the Los Angeles album. And then that Jack DeBon guy went on to play in Channel 3. There was a punk band out of Cerritos called Channel 3.
Sure.
And then, so they went on to share members. I think Oscar Estrella may have played, I think he played in a band called Hated Principles for a little while, or sat in with them. And then, I want to say he may have sat in with the Dickies. I don't know. I had heard that. I don't know if it's true or not. But just as time went on, I watched those guys. They took me seriously, and they were very nice to me. I would walk home from school, and sometimes Oscar would be kind of outside in his garage, just riffing and jamming, and I'd stop, and he'd be playing, and he just, showed me all kind of riffs, and I was just mesmerized. I'd sit there and watch him play, and I'd be like, "Can you play this?" And he'd play it, and he taught me about like palm muting and just all kinds of like little tricks of the trade. And then as time went on and we started bands and playing and stuff, he was always just very cool and loaning us amps, equipment, and all that kind of stuff. But that was kind of my lead in to punk rock, at least as a listener.
Yeah, and then do you start playing guitar shortly after that?
Well, sort of. I kind of picked up the guitar. My brother played guitar. He was more of an acoustic guy. He and his friend Mark Ford. You ever heard of Mark Ford?
I have not.
He played in the Black Crowes.
Okay.
He went on to play in the Black Crowes. Anyways, my brother was buddies with Mark Ford when we were little kids, and they started out playing guitars together. They played like Fleetwood Mac covers in the elementary school talent show, and I always remember because I was in like third grade, my brother was in sixth, so it was in two separate buildings, and my brother always laughs because he remembers going into the auditorium, and I was sitting there kind of crisscross applesauce watching. He and Mark Ford played "Don't Stop" by Fleetwood Mac, so I thought it was kind of rad. So I thought, I kind of like to play the guitar too. So I went to one or two kind of group lessons. One of the teachers at my elementary school, Mr. Milling, did evening group guitar lessons for free. And that's where Mark Ford and my brother used to go. And I tagged along like one time, and it was the acoustic guitar, and it just wasn't for me. I was like, it was too much work. I just, learning those chords and those kind of songs, it just wasn't my thing. But then as time went on, I guess going into middle school, I met a kid named Stuart Holliday. And then also in middle school, you have the elementary schools kind of converged into the one larger middle school where I grew up. And there were kids that I had played sports with, baseball and basketball and whatnot. There was another kid named Steve Raza, who was also into Black Flag, who went to a different elementary school, but now here we are. We all go to the same middle school. So meet this kid, Stuart Holiday, and this other kid, Steve Raza, that I knew for many years. And the three of us decide that we're going to start something. Steve played guitar, and Stuart was just a natural on the drums. Stuart hated punk rock, but man, he was a good drummer. He was more into like Journey and REO Speedwagon and, like Queen. And he was still into Kiss, which nobody was listening to Kiss, at least not at my middle school in, 81 or whatever. That's like when The Elder was coming out and stuff. But anyways, he was still a diehard Kiss guy. So I kind of reacquainted myself with Kiss. And the middle ground that we found, the three of us, wasn't punk rock, wasn't Journey, but we would play like Van Halen covers and this sort of thing. And then we would also do Clash covers and that sort of stuff. That was really the first band that I was in middle school. We played parties and maybe like 4 or 5 parties, and I was absolutely hooked. And then as time went on, I was working for a baseball card dealer, and we would go up to like San Francisco and Seattle for baseball card shows. And as payment, he was a metalhead guy. And this is right when like the Great White EP had just come out, and I think the first Motley Crue record. This is like 82, I guess. As payment or as partial payment, we would go to metal shows. So I'm playing in this band with Raza and Stuart Holiday, and at the same time getting to go see like Great White at the Troubadour, and shows like that. I'm going and seeing all these Sunset Strip bands, and it was really cool. And then meeting people from the Bay Area, from the baseball card circuit, that were like metalheads, and we would trade records and tapes and all that sort of stuff. So it was kind of like parallel lives going on. I really liked punk rock, but I wasn't crossing paths with anybody that actually wanted to play it. So as middle school kind of went on, Stuart Holiday moved to Norwalk, which was a town over. So he switched schools. We would try to kind of keep things together, but he was going into a different direction. And then one day he got frustrated because I wasn't progressing as a musician very much. And he just goes, "Why don't you just start a punk band?" And at this point, Steve Winders, who I was going to middle school with also, had started playing guitar. And Steve Winders is the other guitar player in Visual Discrimination. But before Visual Discrimination, Winders and I started a punk band called RTO with a dude named Charlie Moore, who was from Santa Ana. And he was another baseball card like circuit guy who was into punk rock. So Charlie was the singer. Steve and I played guitars. And we had this kid named Kurt Roble, who was also a baseball card guy, playing the bass. Kurt wasn't really a punk. He was just kind of, we were friends, and he was hanging out and stuff, and he would accommodate us and play bass. We didn't have a drummer, but it didn't matter. We would get in there and we would like start ripping these tunes and playing and all this kind of stuff. So I guess 8th grade summer going into my freshman year, we started with RTO, and that was really my first punk band that I started. Steve Winders and I got started.
Do you ever find a drummer or do a recording?
Yeah, eventually we find drummers, but for RTO, no. Well, I mean, we recorded, just with a radio where you hit play and record outside the garage.
Sure.
And I still have that tape kind of floating around somewhere, but it was, nothing to nothing to write home about.
Sure.
It's pretty remedial stuff.
Do you remember starting to go to punk and hardcore shows? And do you any early memories of that?
Yeah. I guess it would have been, well, there were some things that kind of happened in between before I could really. I just didn't have access to punk shows. I worked for that guy, and he was a metal guy, but there was no way that we were going to punk shows. So I just didn't have access. I didn't drive, and I wasn't. I hadn't stayed in touch with the Silvas down the street enough to be going to shows with them, and they had kind of gone on a different punk rock path than I had. I was getting more into different stuff. It wasn't until, well, you'd have punk bands play like at the lunch hour at my high school and stuff. But as far as going to punk shows, it probably wasn't until like 84 into 85. And that was into my end of freshman going into sophomore year. Steve and I met a kid named Byron Bailey. And Byron Bailey had just transferred into our high school. He had lived in Lakewood, which was the town over. And my grandmother lived in Lakewood, so I was there pretty often. But Steve and I are standing there one day at lunch, and this dude walks by, and he's wearing like pegged Dickies pants and winos, like a pair, what winos shoes are.
Sure.
And like a Harrington jacket and like a shaved head. But he was on the football team. So we couldn't tell if he was like a football guy or what. We're looking, and it's like, nah, this guy's into something. We went up to him. We just kind of went up and smothered him. We're like, hey, what do you got going on? We get to talking, and he's like, oh, my name's Byron. And sure enough, he's into all of the like Ill Repute, Stalag 13, and all of that Oxnard stuff. And he has heard of all these bands that Winders and I have been obsessing about for the last, year and a half. And it's like, hey man, will you play an instrument? And he's like, no, not really. But we kind of conscribed him, and it was almost a well you do now kind of a situation.
Sure.
It's like, how would you like to play the bass? And he's like, oh, okay. So we kind of started jamming with him, and he says, well, I know a guy named Morgan, and then another dude named Miles from Lakewood, from his old neighborhood. And Morgan plays the drums. What do you think? We're like, yeah. So we go, Winders, Byron, and I go over to this kid, Morgan Smith's house in Lakewood, and we start playing. And it's like, this guy's a good drummer. He's like a year younger than us, but he's good. You watch a drummer and you can just tell, you know what I mean? You can just tell if somebody's good or not.
Absolutely.
Gets it. And yeah, so this kid got it. He was really good. So, we're kind of jamming and playing and stuff, but it's hard to get there. He doesn't drive. We don't drive. Once in a while we'll play at my house. My mom went to Holland for, like a month and a half back in like 85. And my dad was awesome. And he, but my poor dad works the 4 to midnight shift, right? So it was like free reign for band practice in my garage at all hours until my dad got home. So we would have Morgan, and everybody would come over, and we'd jam in my garage really loud, really late. And that band was called the Imps.
It's a great name.
Yeah. And, there was some tapes floating around. We never recorded anything formally. But, it was fun and it was great. That Miles kid who was to be the singer, I don't know. I never really got to know him very well. He seemed like a nice guy, but I don't know the reason. He just kind of stopped coming around. I think he was into skateboarding more than wanting to play in a punk band. So Byron says, well, I might know another guy. And we're like, all right, who? He says, my brother. I was like, okay, well, let's find out. So we go over to Byron's house and wait to meet his brother. And his brother walks in after he gets home from work, and it's Tim Sawyer, right? Like, so we getting to know this guy, and Tim's a couple of years older, and just the Oh man, I mean, talk about mine and Steve's lives just really changed forever for the better. When we had the combo platter of Byron Bailey and Tim Sawyer, and it was at that point that we really, really became mobile and being able to go to punk rock shows. And, these are the backyard parties in the middle of in the middle of some neighborhood in Long Beach. And the Fender shows and the Melody Dance Theater shows and the Olympic Auditorium and just all of that stuff. It was Tim Sawyer who really, really kind of opened the door for me to start going to those kind of shows.
And any standout shows you remember?
Yes. Probably the show that really kind of set it in motion for me is we went to a show in a backyard in Long Beach, and there was a half pipe and probably 100 people, and the band Dissension. You know Dissension?
Sure.
Yeah, they were playing in this. They were in the bottom of the half pipe, and they were playing, and people were, guys were skating the pipe while they were playing, and I'm watching and kind of looked. I was a taller kid, so I was able to kind of look over the shoulders of people down into this little pit area where the half pipe was, and just watch Dissension play to these 100 people in this backyard. Dude, the energy and that size crowd, that has from. I was so taken by that and watching Dissension just rip it up, and they were so good. God, Billy Myers, the drummer, was so good, and they sounded just fantastic. They were great. That really, really made a mark on me. It was like, oh my God, I want to play these kind of shows. Nothing more, nothing less. Right? That was like, that's it. This is what I want to play, these kind of shows, and I want to go to these kind of shows. And then there were, so that one really made a mark on me. And I want to say it was Mike Chirico was the guitar player for Dissension. He was this little guy who looked like Paul Simon with his SG and his Marshall. He had been in a band called Target of Demand. But just watching him shred it up for Dissension, and then they had Matt Vargas. Matt and Kelly were brothers, and Matt Vargas kind of brought the heavy for Dissension. He had a modified Marshall, and oh God, they were so freaking good. So that was a real standout for me, watching Dissension at this party, and just the crowd was into it, and people were skating, and it was fantastic. And then another standout was in Cerritos, actually. I worked at a gas station, and somebody told me DEI is playing in a house in Cerritos. So Tim and Byron and Steve and Steve's brother Jeff Minders and I went and saw DEI in a freaking bedroom at this house in Cerritos, and it was awesome. They were so great. And you're there and you kind of know people, and there's other people you don't know, because I mean, it's DI, right? So they're pulling from Fullerton and all these other kind of areas that I hadn't really ventured out into yet. So it was cool. You met a lot of folks, and that one really kind of stuck out for me. And the one night, just having a practice at Morgan's house, and Tim Sawyer's like, it was right after a band practice, and it was just kind of there's a show at Fender, so we all pile into Tim Sawyer's car and we go, and it was Aggression, and it was awesome. That was, oh man, that was really, really something for me, because that first Aggression record, I learned to play drums to that record. I learned to play guitar to that record. It's an absolute masterpiece. It is for me now. I've listened to it steadily for the last, however many years. And it was a masterpiece for me then. So to be able to, hey, we're going to go see Aggression tonight. And it was, I'm not sure who played drums, but it was Henry on guitar, it was Bob on bass, and it was Mark on vocals. I just don't know who played the drums, but dude, it was awesome. I mean, it was so, God, they were great. And then I want to say it was Doggy Style, I think, opened for them. And just a free for all. It was insane. It was so fun. And again, meeting people, seeing faces, a lot of faces. This is a lot of people I didn't know. But it was great. It was just great.
Were you intimidated by the crowd at Fenders at all?
At that time, no, but it was probably because I didn't know any better. And I think it might have been a little on the early side. I wouldn't say be intimidated by the crowd at Fenders, but just, you always kind of had your back to the wall at Fenders, or at least I did, as time went on. It started to get a little rowdy. There was a show, if we fast forward a little bit, it was a show that Visual Discrimination played there with the Cro-Mags and Uncle Slam. And I love the Cro-Mags, and I really love Uncle Slam. But I tell you what, man, that was a pretty interesting crowd that night, and that was one that you had to kind of be on your toes a little bit. But I was always a pretty mellow guy, fly under the radar as far as that kind of stuff went. I never had any problems as far as that kind of stuff went.
That's cool. So let's talk about starting VD. How does the band with Tim in it merge into doing VD and you deciding to have him sing?
Well, once Tim had joined with the Imps, the name of that band changed to Dead Tradition, and we played a couple of parties, and then Morgan moved to Hawaii to live with his dad. So that kind of started bringing it to a halt. And at that point, we were just kind of hanging out, not playing in a band, but going to shows. And then when I was in, I guess maybe sophomore year, I was in auto shop, which, if you know me, that's kind of a joke that I would be in auto shop. But anyways, I was in an auto shop class, which also under the same roof had the auto body class. And there was this new guy from Lakewood who had transferred into my school named Jeff Zimmerman. And I was over there, I see he's a punk rock guy. So we get to talking, and we're kind of, standing. He had a Datsun 510. We're kind of standing, and, it's like a class project and stuff, but we get to talking about punk rock. And he's like, oh, yeah, I play in a little band with some guys. And I go, oh, really? I played in a band with some guys. He says, what do you do? I says, guitar. And he says, oh, we should get together. And he says, yeah, we should get together. So like that weekend, he comes and picks me up. We go over there and we play. I had written, there's a Visual Discrimination song called Resist, and I had written that, so I had that song already. So we kind of played that song a little bit, and, he was running around with all these Lakewood punks, and it was great. We practiced at his house, and his mom was at work all day, and we're in the garage, and there's just every Lakewood punk was just coming and going to his garage all day. So I got to know all of those Lakewood punk guys, and they were real into I was like a 7 Seconds, Aggression, all that nardcore stuff. I was heavy into all that stuff, and a straight edge guy. I was all into all the straight edge stuff, and these guys were like MDC, Conflict, and all that more political kind of stuff. And I loved all the political stuff. I was real into all the Discharge and all of that, like Crucifix and those bands as well. I was very, very into that stuff. But these guys were like a whole nother level. So like Crusty, all that kind of stuff. They were into that. So I'm over there and we're playing, and they're all mohawked out and all this kind of stuff, but we all get along and it's great. And that night, the first practice, that night, Zimmerman says, "Oh, so-and-so's having a party. You want to go play it?" I'm like, yeah. So the three of us go. It was me, that kid named Dan Fisher, and Zimmerman, and we go play. And the other guitar player, his name was Derek Alford. For whatever reason, it just never really materialized with him playing guitar. And I kind of started being the guitar player with these guys. And then after a couple weeks of jamming, it became clear that it was like, okay, what are we going to do? We need a singer. What are we going to do? And I said, I might know some guys. They said, okay. And I asked Tim and Steve Winders to come and play lead guitar. And we all got together. And Zimmerman had already named the band before I had gone and jammed with them. They were calling themselves Visual Discrimination, but they didn't have any songs. It was more like a talking kind of concept thing at the time.
Sure.
But once Steve and Tim and I merged with Zimmerman and Danny Fisher, that's when we really started kind of playing and writing songs, and that's where it started, was in that garage in Lakewood.
Do you do a demo before the LP?
We did, but there was a breakup, a couple of other bands that started, and then VD kind of re-emerged.
Okay.
But
was there an official VD demo before the LP?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there was.
Cool.
But before that, it was Visual Discrimination split. And Winders and I, Tim and Danny Fisher and Zimmerman started a D-beat band called Nonfiction, and they were good. And they had guitar. A kid named George Contreras from Cerritos played guitar, and they were freaking good. And then Winders and I started just this over-the-top straight-edge band called Denial, with a kid named Rory Cowan on bass. And I actually switched over to played drums in Denial. Jeff Winders, Steve's brother, was the singer. And we were in Denial. And this is when all of the Uniform Choice demo was out, and all that Uniform Choice shows at Fenders and Melody Dance Theater, all those shows were going on. And it was at that point when we were in Denial that we were in the band Denial, when we were going to all the Uniform Choice shows and really getting into all of that stuff. Nonfiction did a demo, and I wish I had a copy of it because it was great. And they had some songs that became Visual Discrimination songs. And then Denial recorded a demo, a 12-song demo, and a lot of those songs eventually became Visual Discrimination tunes. But for whatever reason, Nonfiction kind of hit the skids, and it just wasn't working. And Denial kind of ran its course, and we all kind of looked at each other and said, we should get Visual Discrimination back together again. And we did. And, we brought all of the straight edge songs from Denial, and they brought all of their kind of Animal Rights and B-beat songs, all your Theft of the Age kind of songs from Nonfiction, and we put it all together. And then we went to, there was a place in La Palma called Plaza Music. And we had gotten to know the guys that worked there. And every Friday night they would have just kind of an open store where you could go and get behind the drums and turn on the amps and grab a guitar off the shelf and plug it into a Marshall. And basically we would go and have band practice with all of this high-end equipment. And as we got to know these guys, they had all kinds of recording equipment. And we recorded the Denial demo at Plaza Music after hours on the recording equipment for $100. And then we did the same thing with Visual Discrimination. We did the 12-song demo at Plaza Music for $105. I think that one cost.
That one was pricey.
Yeah, just a little.
Yeah.
Different engineer.
Do most of those songs make it onto the LP?
Yeah, I think just about every single one did, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
And just a sidetrack, what was it like seeing Uniform Choice around that time?
Incredible. It was so great. Yeah, Jeff Winders had gotten a hold of the demo, and me, Steve, and Jeff would ride three in the cab, and we would listen to. He had this tape. On the one side was the Uniform Choice demo, and on the other side was the Scared Straight 7-inch. And I love the Scared Straight 7-inch. And one night, we went to see Uniform Choice and Scared Straight. It was at the Melody Dance Theater. This was great. And Uniform Choice was just freaking insane. I think Blast played that show too, because Pat Dubar was on the stage talking about how we just signed Blast to Wishing Well Records, and they're going to have a record coming out. And then Blast played, and I thought they sounded like, well, at first, I was kind of like a lot of people. It was like, this sounds like Black Flag, and then you kind of start to scratch the surface, and anymore it sounds nothing like Black Flag. It's just its own thing, and it's phenomenal. But anyways, it was incredible. I was full bore jumping on stage. Sorry, Dubar. I was grabbing the mic out of Dubar's hand, and screaming the word. I mean, it was awesome. It was so great.
Yeah.
And that's where, a lot of those Orange County kind of sloth crew guys and I would come to know as time went on. Those were some of the first shows where I crossed paths with some of those dudes. But the Scared Straight show, Scott Radinsky had a baseball game or something, right? So he wasn't there, but Scared Straight was going to play. So they get up there, and they're like, our singer's got a baseball game or whatever, so we don't have a singer. So, and then the Winders brothers and I just grabbed that mic, and we were singing Scared Straight songs. It was freaking awesome.
So rad.
There you go. Yeah, God, I love Scared Straight. Their guitar player had a Laney half stack, and an SG, which I always would take 10, 15 seconds and just kind of obsess on everybody's gear and kind of make mental notes of what they were playing.
Sure.
So, anyways.
So
Uniform Choice was great.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, VD does a demo, and then do you start playing shows, or are you still playing parties?
Yeah, parties mostly, and I'm not sure. When I worked at that gas station, and as luck would have it, it was in the next town over in La Palma, and I didn't know too many kids. It was Kennedy High School in La Palma. I didn't know too many kids that went to that school, but I was obviously a punk rock guy working at this gas station, with the Paul Weller Dickies and big bright ass blue pointy toe creepers and my Union 76 shirt and my bald head, right? I was like this punk guy. So the punks from Kennedy would come in and get gas, and we would strike up conversations. And for whatever reason, one time somebody said, hey, we're having a party. If you're in this band, why don't you come and play? So that things would kind of start falling into our laps that way. And then, God, that 76 station was a gold mine. People coming in and out of there. Eddie Egan from Savage Beat Records, he put out like Heavy Dirt and the Pig Children EP, and just seminal records that I had just spent hours and hours just listening to. All of a sudden, Eddie Egan is getting gas at the 76 station. And then one time this skate kid comes in with this other dude who looked like he had just come from soccer practice or something. And this is like 1985. And I'm blaring. The mechanics and the managers had left, so I'm blaring 7 seconds inside the gas station. And this kid they come in to get gas, use the bathroom. He's like, hey, is that 7 seconds? Yeah. And we exchange numbers, and he gives me this piece of paper, and I look, and it's like his name. I'm reading this right? And his name was Zoltan Teglis. I was like, that's cool. So it turned out it was Zoli from who I would see again. He did some things with Evan Jacobs for Anhedenia Films, and he didn't remember any of that Union 76 stuff, but I remembered it. I was like, I never, you don't forget a name like that. But anyways, it was kind of cool. So, it was just people kind of coming through. And then there were some girls that would come through from Kennedy High School who, next thing I know, I'm going to the Olympic Auditorium with them, and they're keeping their ears open and getting us parties to play and all this kind of stuff. And then Tim Sawyer was just a freaking gold mine for booking parties and shows and all this kind of stuff. And he knew everybody and just had all these, Tim's he's just a good dude, and he knew a lot of folks, and he got us a lot of parties, and we had this demo. And at the time, you would take demos to Zeds, and we would take them by the 10s or 20s and sell them. And so we had a lot of word of mouth that way. And then we got a pretty good review in Maximum Rock and Roll, our demo. So we got a lot of shows there that way. And then in Flipside magazine, I guess this would have been like 87 going into 88, we got Best New Band runner-up behind Operation Ivy, which,
wow.
I can live with that.
Yeah.
But we started getting a lot of traction from that, a lot of shows from that. So, yeah.
One thing, looking at the back of the first VD LP, it says that you recorded from November 87 through May of 88. That just seems like such a long time to record. How was that process?
It was two separate, like 10-hour sessions. And if you listen, when I listen, I haven't listened in a long time, but when I listen to that record, I can really tell the difference between the two sessions and the guitar sounds. And we didn't have any tuners or anything, so the tuning is all very different in the two different sessions. Like the first, I think we did 6 songs in 87, and then around May 88, we went in and did 14 more, however many more. So that's why it was two separate. We were just going to do a 7-inch, and nothing became of it. And then all of a sudden we had all these new songs which we thought were worth recording. So we went in and recorded them, and then so that's why it was the two separate times.
Gotcha. How do you hook up with Big Frank and Nemesis?
Well, it's funny because I would see Big Frank. I don't know if he remembers this or not. I saw him at an LA Guns show at the Troubadour. Jeff Winders and I had gone up to see LA Guns, and I saw Big Frank. Like, hey, because we're these punk kids at this metal show. So we I knew his face from there and from Zed. Like, that's the guy that works at Zed. And then at the Olympic, you would see him, and it was like 2,000 people and Big Frank walking around with like a baseball bat in his hand. And that was the security. Somehow he was able to keep order all this place. So it's like you just kind of know this guy, or of this guy, this presence. And then you'd go in to Zed, and he was, I always describe my dad this way too. He's kind of the shy Goliath, the gentle giant, the shy Goliath. Real soft-spoken dude, kind of a big dude, but real soft-spoken. And that's kind of where we got to know him. It's just going in and out of Zeds and then seeing him at these kind of random kind of places. And then just kind of striking up a little bit of a kinship. Tim talked to him quite a bit. And then Winders and I would kind of chit chat with them, and just bringing demos, and he would let us know that they were out of VD demos. We need more of this kind of stuff, and he was always just really, really accommodating as far as letting us sell our demo, just kind of hang out at the store, and I don't know, we all just kind of seemed to bring a smile to each other's faces whenever we saw each other, and we just seemed to really hit it off. A lot of it was about music and talking about music. Most of it was talking about other stuff. So, that we had in common.
And then how do you approach him to do the record? Did you ask him or did he ask you?
It was, well, we were originally going to go with this label called National Trust, and they had a band called MIA. You remember MIA?
Sure.
Yeah. Oh, God, we loved MIA. And they had that first record on Alternative Tentacles. And they were a Vegas band, but they had relocated out to Huntington. So we were talking to MIA because we were going to be on the same label with them, National Trust. And then it turned out that the guy that ran National Trust, name was Ron. I think that he probably had some sort of a substance problem, the way he was just kind of carrying himself, and he was very, very mysterious and shady. But we had signed with him. We signed a contract and given him all of our stuff, all of our artwork, all of our tapes, all that stuff. And then it was just like radio silence, that he was dodging us and we couldn't get the stuff back. And as this was going on, whenever we would go to Zed, we would kind of vent to Frank about a lot of that stuff. So, Frank had a sympathetic ear for some of the problems that we were having. And then push finally came to shove with that Ron guy. And we kind of shook his roommate down a little bit. And then he took us to where Ron was. And then I didn't shake anybody down. I was just kind of along for the ride. Tim Sawyer kind of shook the guy down, and we got our stuff back. And at that point, once we got the stuff back, Frank, I think the wheels had started turning that he was going to maybe start a record label of some sort. And then, we're in Zed one day and it's like, hey, what's going on? Nothing. We got our stuff back. And then next thing you know, he's like, well, maybe I can put that out. First it was, I may know somebody that could put it out. And then he's like, no, I don't know. I'll put it out. And we thought, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. So that's kind of how that worked out. Just over the counter right there at Zed.
Yeah. So cool. What was the idea for like the album cover? And also, how soon before you took the photo did you guys take your shirts off?
I've taken my shirt off once, but I've always had my back turned to whoever. I don't take my shirt off. Sawyer and Junior take their shirts off. I guess we took those pictures in, probably like, in like late 87, early 88, probably. I think we had those pictures done before the second recording, or finishing up the recording for the second batch of songs. Tim lived in Cypress, kind of by the racetrack out there in Cypress, California. And across the street from Tim lived this girl, Stephanie, and her boyfriend, Kirk Dominguez, lived there. And Kirk was a photography guy, and he was great friends with Tim. And that's Winders and I got to know Kirk because he lived across the street from Tim. And every party he was at the DI party, we would go to see Adolescents at a party, and Kirk was always there. And he put out a magazine called SFTG, Something from the Grave. And he agreed to go out all through Long Beach one day and just take a bunch of pictures. So that's the one on the cover, is the one that made the cover. But gosh, there's probably a couple hundred just negative, undeveloped pictures that Kirk has from that day, because we went just all over Long Beach and snapped so many pictures in front of so much stuff. It was all day long. But Kirk's the kind of guy that takes hundreds of pictures and has negatives, and then, develops a handful. So I think there's a bunch of other bands that he's got just negatives galore. But it was hot that day, and we were I guess that was probably in like Signal Hill area, and we're just taking these kind of alleyway kind of shots and all this sort of stuff. And I don't know, for every picture where somebody doesn't have a shirt on, there's 50 pictures where everybody has their shirt on. So I don't know. It wasn't like, dude, I'm going to take my shirt off and
Sure.
and let's pose and have a. It wasn't anything like that. It was just it was all kind of organic.
Yeah. Was VD a straight edge band, or did you just have songs about it?
Just songs about it. It was because Denial was a straight edge band, and we had the carryover Denial songs. I was super like over the top straight edge guy in Visual Discrimination. Tim kind of in and out. There was a while there. Steve Winders, straight edge, but not like overt about it, but he was. And then Junior Baloki, who was our bass player, not straight edge, punk rock guy, into surfing and all that kind of stuff. And then Jeff Zimmerman, the original drummer, he was like a total D guy, animal rights, vegan, all of that, spiky, just all of that whole scene, not straight edge.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And also, something cool about the first LP, you have 2 anti-cop songs on the record. So one wasn't
Absolutely.
enough. It was kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Badge Happy Cop was a Denial song.
Okay.
And then Prick Cops was a nonfiction song.
Okay.
So there you go.
Yeah.
Independent sources for the 2 anti-cop songs.
That's really cool. I'm glad you backed that up and talked about those 2 bands and how they converged, because that makes a lot of sense. That's cool.
Thank you. Thanks, man. Thanks for hearing me out on that.
Yeah. So when the LP comes out, do you see the popularity of the band grow, and do you start playing club shows?
You know what? Yeah. I mean, it seemed like there were a lot more people that were going off at our shows. But truth be told, I never really in my heart of hearts knew if it was because people were like, fuck yeah, Visual Discrimination, or if it was because Big Frank was, we were friends with him and he was getting us on all these wonderful shows. I think it might have been a combination of both.
Are there any standout shows from that era that you remember?
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's several. One Fender's show was pretty amazing. It was Visual Discrimination, Blast, Excel, RKL, and Exploited. And it was like, oh, yeah, it was awesome. And this is how wonderful Big Frank is and was. It's like, okay, it's a packed house. This is Big Frank talking. It's a packed house, and we start at 8:00 sharp because we have to have the show end by, whatever time. So, Jeff, you guys go on promptly at 8:00, and you have a 25-minute set, no exceptions. And I was able to say, Frank, one exception. He's like, what? Vadim, who was the drummer for Half Off, and we were very good friends with him. Vadim gets off work at the flower shop in Hawaiian Gardens at 7:30, and it's going to be touch and go until he gets here. I just can't promise that he's going to get here by 8:00 to make our first song. So we may need to push it back 10 or 15 minutes until Vadim gets here from the flower shop. And Big Frank kind of goes, okay, let me know when he gets here. So Eric, the show started at like 10 after 8 because, it was packed. There was like 1,000+ people. It was a freaking Exploited show.
Yeah.
But Frank kind of held it off for 10 minutes until Vadim got there before we started. And that set was freaking amazing. And then Blast, that was the first time I saw Excel, and I had never seen anything like that. It was so freaking great. And then, RKO. It was the second time I saw RKO at the Olympic a couple of years before that, which was phenomenal. but yeah, RKO was incredible. That show was just amazing, and it really was a standout because we were on the bill and able to kind of get prime seats, not seats, but just viewing positions from the side of the stage, and really just absorb Blast and just obsess on Blast's drummer, and watch Excel and watch that Adam Siegel guy from Excel just completely shred. Just all of that stuff.
Yeah, so cool. So it takes a little bit of time to do In Vain. What are you doing like during that time? You just playing lots of shows, going to shows?
Yeah, playing lots of shows. I had gone away to school. Like I had gone to school in Boston for a little while, so there was like a several months, like a little hiatus there. It was a summer, but there was a hiatus there, and then just playing shows, kind of trying to write songs, branching out a little bit as far as what I personally was listening to. I had met Isaac Gola by that time, so Steve Winders and I were hanging out with him quite a bit more. And with Isaac Gola, I got a whole new catalog of music that I'm listening to. So going to shows, hanging out, doing stuff, playing, practicing, playing parties, shows, all that kind of stuff. There were always kind of standard shows that we would play, like a New Year's Eve show, or so and so's birthday. There was always, every month and a half to 2 months, there was always something.
So how do you compare In Vain to Step Back and Listen, and which do you like more?
I like Step Back and Listen more. I'm frustrated by both of those records as far as the recordings and stuff. And we did In Vain at West Beach, but I just never got the sense that the guys at West Beach knew what it was that we were after. And I mean, it had all the potential. Matt Vargas from Dissension had loaned me his modified Marshall, and I was playing a BC Rich Mockingbird. Like I had like a good guitar and a good amp, and I always thought my guitar just sounded kind of thin and a little bit weak on that record, and I was always a little disappointed in that. And the drums, we went in, we took the first Metal Church album with us. We're like, we want the drums to sound like this. The guy was like, okay. And then it sounded nothing like that. I don't know. It didn't have that big, cavernous, heavy ass sound that I was looking for. And then the songs on it, I had started, like I said, I had met Isaac by this point, and had actually he and I had actually gone and recorded some songs together. One that became a VD song, and then another, some of the others that became Chorus of Disapproval songs. But Isaac had me listening to, New York Hardcore, Where the Wild Things Are compilation. And you had like those 2 Raw Deal songs and those Outburst songs.
Yeah.
Those 4 songs and that sound, the sounds of those recordings were so influential on me and my songwriting at the time. And I really, a lot of those songs on In Vain, it was my attempt to try to kind of mimic or kind of start writing songs in kind of that mold. But once they kind of got through the ringer and the recording and stuff, it just didn't come out like I had it in my head. Although I do still like the song "Crawling" and how that came out. It's probably my favorite song on that record. But I was always a little frustrated because we're at this kick-ass studio and we've got this great equipment, and it just didn't translate.
How about the intro to Inevitable? What was the idea of going like that? I don't know how I would describe it. It's like a kind of a total departure because it's like a clean channel Metallica-esque intro for a pretty wild style band. What's the idea there?
Well, Steve Winders and I were in Denial together, and we had played, and we were on the upswing and playing all these great parties, and then we played a lunch hour at our school, and it was just awful, and it was embarrassing. And that night, we were so bummed out that we were not going to call it quits, but it was like, man, this sucks. So we started kind of commiserating and playing our acoustic electric guitars that night, and we called it A Month of Sundays. And it was this kind of somber, sad kind of two guitar kind of stuff. And that was the inspiration for that. Steve came up with that guitar intro, and it was kind of hearkening back to A Month of Sundays. And then, we were kind of laughing at the time. It's like, oh, let's totally overproduce that intro with this clean, I'm good. I'm glad to hear you say that, because we were totally going for some over the top kind of that kind of sound. So that's, but it stems from A Month of Sundays, and then he and I just kind of escalating, breaking each other's chops a little bit, and him coming up with that and overproducing it. And so
sure. Another interesting thing I think on the album is doing an AF cover, and you do another one in chorus, but let's talk about this first. So in 1990, why do you feel compelled to put like an iconic song on your LP?
Because they were an iconic band, and we were huge Agnostic Front fans. I was a huge Agnostic Front fan. Love Agnostic Front, and just love that song. A classic song. Little bit at the time, it seemed like it was a little bit of an under the radar Agnostic Front choice, at least on the West Coast. I don't know how that song would go over, for an East Coast band to cover it. But on the West Coast, when you would mention Agnostic Front, you'd get people nodding their heads yes. But when you would say United Blood, that was kind of the sleeper song. And I just love that song.
Yeah, it's cool.
I think I may have strong armed that choice because I liked that. I loved that song.
Yeah.
And Tim called Steve Martin, called him on the phone and got permission to do that. He was like, "Fuck yeah, go for it." So he was cool.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, I was just wondering because it seems like such an iconic song now, but maybe you're right. In '90, the sound had changed from them, and maybe it was a little out of flavor. So, anyways, it's cool to pay homage like that. Does VD do you have a breakup, or do you fade away, or does chorus overlap? How does this end?
I was just starting to kind of write other stuff, and we had changed drummers at this point. Jeff Zimmerman, the original drummer, had left the band, and we had gone, and this is part of that gap that you were referencing, like what were you doing between this time and this time? Well, we didn't have a drummer for quite a while there. And we had shared a drummer with Final Conflict for a couple of shows. Jeff Zimmerman had played, and we had played a lot of shows with Final Conflict as well. And God, talk about one of my favorite bands, one of my favorite guitarists. But anyways, and we got to know those guys, especially Ron from Final Conflict. And when he heard that we were without a drummer, I was talking on the phone with Ron, and he said, "I think I may know a guy. His name is RD, and he's from Huntington Beach, and he's really good." I was like, okay. So I talked to RD on the phone, and we set up this practice at my house, and it's like, I don't know, I think we had him learn a couple of VD songs, and then we may have had him actually learn a couple of Final Conflict songs. Like, let's just come over and let's jam these songs and try it out. And he came, and Davies was like the second coming of Mackie. I mean, he was like unbelievable. So that was kind of the In Vain lineup, and we played a lot of shows with RD. But as time went on, I started listening to just a lot of that New York stuff and was writing different songs, and it just was not just Visual Discrimination. It wasn't. It just wasn't the band to play some of the songs that I was kind of having in my head, and I agonized over it because because I love Steve, I love Tim, but there came a point where I decided that I wanted to play some other stuff, and Isaac and I had started talking about maybe doing some stuff at this point, but we never started Chorus until I was on the phone with Tim and said, dude, I think I'm gonna maybe move on and try something different. And Tim was bummed, but he was very supportive.
Yeah, and did they not consider going on like without you?
They did.
Oh, okay.
They did go on without me. Yeah.
They just I know they did like the 7-inch much later, but how long did they play without you?
They I guess like into the early 90s, into like through the mid 90s. Yeah, they went on to record the best stuff Visual Discrimination ever recorded by far and away was without me. I think that 7-inch is untouchable. That's what I think. But anyway, they at least went.
No, I mean I have it on the list. I was gonna get to it, but we can get to it now. That thing is insane.
Oh God, it's great. Well, and RD had played with Matt Domino from Infest. He played in Man Pig, and I think he played in Infest for a while. So I think Davies was primed to play that kind of stuff. And then, Steve and Tim and I were Infest champions from their demo days. I mean, we were huge, huge Infest fans. Love Infest. Loved Infest. Love Infest. So it's no stretch that Steve and Tim, for all I know, they wanted to play that kind of stuff all along, and I was the squeaky wheel. Who knows? But yeah, they wrote some bangers. I love that 7-inch.
Yeah, that was actually another thing I had on my list. You did backup vocals on the first Infest 7-inch. How what? I mean, they're such an interesting band. I got to get someone from them on the pod. But what did you think about them? Like the first time you heard them, like how did it settle into your brain?
The first time I heard them was their demo, and it was really raw, and it was 2 guitars, 1 in each speaker, and one was slightly out of tune with the other one. And I thought it was like, who cares? Fuck it. They're playing these great songs. It was awesome. I loved it. And we played some shows together. And I mean, I was a fan, and I'm generally a pretty shy guy, but when the time is right, I struck and went and introduced myself to Matt Domino and to Dave Ring, the bass player. And they were just awesome guys, really nice, laughing all the time, just cool dudes. They lived far away though. They lived out by like Magic Mountain. But there were times I would drive out there, bring my guitar, go to Matt's house. We would jam, we would play stuff. We hung out. We got to know each other and playing shows and going to each other's houses and stuff. I collect old expired IDs, like high school IDs and stuff, and I have a 1985 Matt Domino. So there you go.
Yeah. Did you know at that time that they would end up being like just this seminal, iconic band that is looked back on so like with such reverence?
Did not know at that time. I remember talking to Matt once, and this always stuck with me because every time they put something out, I always remember this conversation. He was telling me he was really into like bands like Siege from Boston and these kind of heavy, like power violence kind of bands. And he's like, I love the limited release. He's like, there's nothing better than like a 7-inch coming out with a release of 300, and that's it. Once they're gone, they're gone. He's like, that's what I want to do. I want to put out records, like a bunch of different records where there's like only 100 of them. And he told me that, and he was all fired up about it. And I was like, yeah, that's, all right. Yeah, that sounds kind of cool. And so every time, I don't know if you've had this experience. I've always had a hard time getting my hand on Infest stuff. And I think that might be the reason. But no, I didn't know that they would be so iconic, but they should be.
Yeah, I mean, they are now.
They're great.
They are now for sure. But you're right. Their stuff is harder to get. I just have bootlegs, so but I have everything. So let's talk about starting Chorus. So you're friends with Isaac at this point, and you're writing songs. You do a demo before the LP, right? But then you go write demo to LP.
Right. Yeah. It was, and it was real fast. It was like I was working at a park, and for whatever reason, I would always seem to get, we had a recreation room at the park, and they would, people would come and have parties from 6 p.m. to midnight. And it seemed like I was more than others drawing the short straw. So it was like, hey, guess what, Jeff, you get to work 6 to midnight. So I used to bring my guitar and amp to work, and I would just kind of hole up in the office and just play my guitar for 6 hours. So one night I wrote, I don't know, 7 or 8 songs at work. And then the next day, Isaac and I went in and recorded them in some guy's house, some house studio in Torrance. Yeah, so that was really fast. And so we had we had the Chorus demo. But it wasn't a band at the time.
Gotcha. So when do you decide to make it a full-blown band?
Well, I mean, it was just a project because drummers were always hard to come by. And after leaving Visual Discrimination, I wasn't going to ask, all right, hey, dude, can you come and play drums? I just didn't have the balls to ask him. Although I had the balls to ask if I could borrow his drum kit, and he was cool, but I didn't ask him to be in the band. He had other stuff going on. So it was just a project, and that was about it. I mean, it wasn't going to be anything serious. I don't really remember when the tide turned on that. I think it was after we had recorded, or while we were recording the LP, because it was just Isaac and me that went in and recorded that LP. And I had shown that demo to Frank, and he kind of got a kick out of it, thought it was funny. And he's like, I'll put this out as a 7-inch. And I don't know why I said this, but I said, no, Frank, this is going to be a 12-inch, and we need to go re-record this stuff. And I'm not sure why he said yes, but I remember him kind of laughing and saying, all right, fuck it, I'm in. Yeah, let's do it. So he was cool that way. So we booked at West Beach 20 hours and borrowed a bunch of equipment and went in there and recorded it. And as we were recording it, this is when Instead had just signed to Epitaph. So those guys were down there one day when we were there. We saw them for 15, 20 minutes. And Kevin, I remember Kevin saying, oh, yeah, I heard you guys are doing a project like judge kind of thing. And so I know at that point it was still a project when we were recording it. But as time went on and we were listening to the recordings and playing the recordings for friends and all this kind of stuff, we just kind of said, man, maybe we should do something with this. And that's, we just kind of started scratching our heads and then put our heads together and like, okay, who are we going to get?
So
yeah.
do you even play a show before the record comes out?
Yeah.
Okay.
What we had a habit of doing is taking that soundboard, that demo, we would go to shows, and I did this with the visual. I was back all the way back to the VD demo days, and then the VD record, all that stuff. I would always go up to the sound man at any show and say, "Hey, dude, put this on between bands." And then, after a band would finish, they'd put on the chorus recording. And then we'd kind of start making the rounds at the show, handing out flyers saying, "Hey, do you hear this? Yeah, this is this band. Check it," and start kind of promoting it that way. So we had the recording, but it hadn't been released. And, we decided it was going to be a band, and we got Regis and Jerry Holman to play in the band. And then the record itself, came out like 6 or 8 months after our first show, I want to say.
Do you remember the first show?
Yeah, it was at a Tupperware house, like a Tupperware, like a warehouse of some kind. And I forget, one of the Sloth Crew guys' dad owned it. There was some connection there. And we got onto that. We got onto that show. That was our first show, because we had, at this point, there was really no other choice. But we got Regis Guerin to play bass, and he was a Sloth Crew guy, and he had all these connections with a lot of those Orange County guys. So whenever a show was going down in Orange County, we had a pretty good inside track to be able to get on to some of that stuff.
What was that first show like? What do you remember about it?
It was, the tape, nothing had really circulated, so not too many people knew the songs. Some of the Cerritos straight edge contingent, the Tony and Raphael Zentels, the Adam Bullards, the Matt Bullards, those guys, those Cerritos straight edge kids who had like a bootleg, who I had made recordings of it. They were there and they went off and were singing and stuff. But for the most part, and then you had a lot of Regis's buddies would kind of go off a little bit because it was, Regis's band. But we didn't know any of those guys yet. But it was pretty lukewarm. I mean, it was fun playing and stuff. It was pretty lukewarm, as I recall. It wasn't like epic or anything like that.
How is the LP received when it finally comes out?
Well, I think it was received okay. And it was kind of tough because we had recorded it and we were playing shows and starting to get some traction. And then I moved up to away. I go away to school. I had gotten into school, and I moved. So as soon as, and I remember coming back, I went up to school in the Bay Area, and I came back down the day the record came out, and they had like a little record release thing at Zed. And, it was great and everything, but I was really kind of disconnected from it when it first came out, which was kind of a bummer. And I mean, nobody gave a shit about a straight edge band up in the Bay Area at the time. So, I mean, I know that when we would play shows that people knew the words a lot more, and it was, there was a lot more crowd participation in Mayhem. But so, I mean, judging from that, I think that it was getting some traction. but I was kind of disconnected from hearing about it in the Southern California scene, at least on a constant basis.
This is also like a pretty weird time for hardcore, right? Like it's a total transition stage, 91 and then into 92.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. It felt like, I personally felt like, it was moving into a different direction that I was not going to be included in. It's just, yeah, it was just, different. It was just a different mindset, different vibe, different sounds, different musicianship. It was moving in a direction where, frankly, I didn't feel like I was a decent enough guitarist to start playing any of this new kind of stuff. And, going away to school, and I just wasn't writing, wasn't a real prolific writer at this time. So, yeah, and it was changing, and I was kind of withdrawing at the same time.
You do another 7-inch comes out the same year though, the Italian 7-inch. Is that recorded and comes out in 91?
No, the Godfather 7-inch comes out in, I think, 91.
Yeah.
On Nemesis.
Got them backwards. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one, and and even that, I think. Let's see. Regis wrote, I think that was 3 songs, and Regis wrote 2 of them. I contributed 1 or 2 riffs to the songs that he just wrote, but like songs like Chance, Full Circle Stop, those are Regis Garin songs. He had kind of taken the reins and started writing, and then like a lot of the heavier, slower stuff. I was writing more of that slow kind of stuff at that time. That's where I was starting to progress into.
And are you just playing? Yeah. Are you playing shows when you come back to visit from college?
Yeah, I had fell in with a group of guys up in the Bay Area. A fellow named Corey Sabatini, who he had been in Unit Pride, and then Joey Vella from Breakaway and Rabid Lassie, Mike Pecos, Christian Rauman. There was like a Bay Area straight edge crew up there, and I got to know those guys. And thank God I did, because I was not mobile up there. I didn't have a car or anything. But when Chorus would get booked for shows, it was always Southern California. Like we played a show with GBH and Beowulf at the Country Club. And it was, finish class on Friday. Sabatini and those guys picked me up. We load the shit in, drive to the Country Club, play the show, go to my parents' house, spend the night, get up Saturday, go putz around, hang out, get stuff to eat, and then either drive back Saturday night or spend the night, drive back Sunday morning. And it was a lot of that. And it was, it was awesome. I mean, it was fun, but I always just kind of felt like I had one foot somewhere else at the time. I just felt like I wasn't fully committed to Chorus, but I loved Chorus and playing in hardcore bands so much that I wasn't fully committed to school either, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, because you do make it out to the East Coast, right? When did that happen?
We do. We went, that happened a couple of years later. That was in the summer of 94.
Okay.
I graduated, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, well, then we should just you do another 7-inch in 1993. That one is the Italian 7-inch.
It is. Yeah. That was, I got a call or a letter from some guy in Italy from Helter Skelter Records saying, hey, would you guys be interested in releasing a record in Italy? And I thought, truth be told, I thought of Matt Domino when he said that. And I thought, oh man, this sounds like Matt Domino kind of stuff. And I said, yeah, hell yeah, we would. Well, what would you need? And I was like, I don't know what we would need. I don't know, $500 to record. And they wired over money, and we went in and recorded those songs. It was Downslide, Father's Day. That Agnostic Front cover. But again, we were without a drummer, and not a lot of time to practice. I had graduated from college at that time, so I was living back in Southern California, but we just didn't have a solid drummer. So it was, go in, and I played the drums on it, but it wasn't like we could practice it. It was just you go in and do the best you can with what you got. But yeah, so we did record that. We got an offer and they wired money. We went in, recorded, put it on a DAT, which I still don't know exactly what that is, but and I sent it via DHL or something to somewhere in Italy, and then a couple months later, a whole bunch of CDs and a whole bunch of 7-inches showed up at my house, and it was pretty rad.
Super cool. So you get an offer to go to the East Coast after that?
No, it was after that 7-inch came out, I had gotten accepted to law school, and knowing what I knew about undergrad and how playing in a hardcore band was I really had a hard time kind of pulling the grades I needed to pull as an undergrad playing, going back and forth playing a hardcore band. I made this decision, which, I probably wouldn't have made this same decision if I knew now what I knew then, but I said, that's it. I am done with, playing in hardcore bands. I'm going to law school, and I'm going to need to dedicate all of my energy to do this. I made this ceremonious, declaration, which, whatever. So I get out there and I thought about playing in a hardcore band every day, and I was distracted. I hated law school, and it was hard, and, it was just miserable. So that was the fall of 93. And then I come back for Christmas, and then I go back to law school for my second semester, and the phone rings, and it's this guy, this German sounding guy, who says, he's like, "Oh, you play in Chorus of Disapproval?" And I said, "Come on, Mo, stop fucking around." And, I thought it was one of my friends playing a joke or whatever. And I hung up on him. And then he calls back. I'm like, "Yeah." And, all of a sudden it's starting to sound a little more legit. And he offers a tour of Europe. He's like, "Would you guys like to you had to, he's like, "Do you have the Italian 7-inch come out in Europe?" "Yeah, well, it's doing well." And, and he's being very complimentary and seems to know things about the other two releases. And he's like, "Would you like to come and tour?" And I'm like, "Well, fuck yeah, I'd like to come tour. Yeah, that sounds wonderful. This is in January." And he's like, "Well, when can you come?" And I said, "Well, it's going to have to be like June, July, because I have this semester of school," which I said that as soon as I said it. I was like, "Okay, that's that. It's not going to happen." And he's like, "Oh, okay, yeah, we can make that happen." And I still didn't know if he was legitimate. So we take down each other's addresses and stuff. And then next thing I know, we're exchanging letters, and there's this buildup for Chorus to go to Europe in the summer of 94. So Isaac gets the bright idea he says, once we're done with Europe, instead of flying home and calling it a wrap, he says we should fly to the East Coast and give some of our friends on the East Coast a taste of what, of the Chorus. I think he actually said it like that. And I kind of laughed, and, I'm all for road tripping. I'm a road tripper. So, I'm like, yeah, that sounds awesome. So next thing I know, we've got 8 dates on the East Coast on the heels of this 30-date Europe tour. So that's how the East Coast happened. It was Isaac really putting in the effort and booking us that handful of shows on the backside of the European tour.
What are some memories of the European tour?
For some reason, I thought it was mostly to just get a laugh out of my friends and just kind of shock value. My brother had bought an Aloha era Elvis Presley jumpsuit, and there was a running joke between my brother, his friends, me, and my friends that if you travel anywhere, you wear the Elvis jumpsuit. And at the time, my brother's a big guy. He's like 6'4", 215. And I was coming in, I'm coming in about 6'2", 215. So we're bigger guys. Not huge, but we're bigger. But this suit is like a size medium, right? It's kind of on the small side. So that's kind of the joke, is that it's this real tight-fitting Elvis suit. So the plan is we're flying British Airways from LA to New York, New York to London to Frankfurt or whatever. Meet at my house. So everybody rolls in at my house. And of course, I've got my hair in this huge pompadour, and I'm wearing the Elvis jumpsuit. And it's like, fuck it, I'm flying to Europe as Elvis. So let's go. So we go, and I've got the blue blocker sunglasses and stuff. And at first, it's freaking great because people are falling all over themselves at the airport. Elvis, and coming and hanging out and stuff. And then in New York, it's not quite as great, but it's still getting some laughs, and we're still, everybody's all smiles. And then we're leaving New York, and we've got our equipment, like our guitars and stuff, right? And the airline's been very accommodating with, I'd like to put this in the captain's closet, please. And they're like, oh, yes, sir, right? And they're really treating my guitar with kid gloves and being cool. Well, when we're going from New York into England, they're like, all right, but I don't know. So they give me the guitar in London, and then from London to Germany, they're like, fuck no, you're not putting this in the captain's closet. You got to check that thing in, right? And I'm like, come on. So, okay, so finally, I relent. They weren't going to let me take it unless I check it in. So I check it in. And of course, I get to Germany, and we're all jet lagged, and I'm dressed as Elvis, and it's no one's laughing like they were, the other three airports. And my guitar kind of comes out into where the luggage is, and I pick it up, and of course it's all smashed, like the case is all thrashed and broken, right? And I'm pissed. So I grab it and I go up to the British Airways, and I'm like irate. I didn't want to check this in the first place. They didn't make me, and I'm reading this poor lady, the riot act, and she and the people behind the counter are just laughing, like at the spectacle of this irate Elvis, just dressing them down about this guitar, right? and the more they're laughing, the more irate I'm getting. And so that's kind of how Europe started. So that was that. And then the guy pulls up, and he's like, oh, nice to meet you. We've waiting hours and hours. This guy finally picks us up, and we're starving. We're jet lagged. And he says, I live in Benoistad. We're like, well, where's Benoistad? He's, it's right down the road. Dude, I swear to God, it was like 3 hours away from the airport, right? So it's just taking forever. We're starving. We get there. It's like, man, a lot of cats, a lot of feral cats running around this neighborhood. What's up? We go to this guy's apartment, and you're hearing the pitter patter of mice and running over you stuff. It's like, man. So I was a little nervous at first in Europe. I'm like, man, I don't know about this. It just wasn't used to it. But I'll tell you what, give it a week, and as we got to kind of know people, and it was it turned out to be just phenomenal. I didn't appreciate it in the moment as much as I should have. But I did learn, for me personally, we would go from one town to the next, and I had my running shoes, and I was doing a lot of running at the time, and I would make it a point to have hours to kill in each town. So I was able to see a lot of the landmarks in a lot of the towns just on foot. I would go run 3, 4, 5 miles around on foot of whatever town we were in. So I was able to really soak in a lot of that stuff. Some of the standout shows, probably Cologne. Like the World Cup was going on, and there's a big Italian contingent that lives in Cologne in Germany. But that show just went off. And then Italy had won a World Cup game, and we stepped out, and it was just mayhem in the streets, people running with flags and going crazy. And then just the fervor, man, the fervor of the crowd. I mean, you see hardcore shows in the States now and people going insane. That's what a lot of the shows there were like. And I was not expecting that. And it was freaking awesome. And, you know, people wanting to hang out and just say hi and, you know, exchange stories. And just, it was great, man. It was great. Yeah, fantastic.
So after Europe, you hit the East Coast, and what do you remember about playing the East Coast?
Well, when we were in Belgium, I think there was some interband strife, and our drummer RD decided that he was not going to play the East Coast shows, and I wish I had that to do over again. I don't know. I think I would have tried a lot harder to kind of smooth feathers of everybody and kind of preserve things. But I don't know. It wasn't the healthiest when he said, I don't think I'm going to do the East Coast. So we were a little bit hamstrung going into the East Coast. So what we did is we had Travis Gashard from guitar player for Mean Season came out. And he had sat in on guitar for us before when we were down a drummer. So I switched over to drums for the East Coast, and Travis played guitar for one show, and then Travis and Regis switched, and Travis played bass, Regis played guitar. What I remember was I was embarrassed the first couple of shows of the East Coast, because at that point, you play 30 shows in a row on guitar, and we were really, really tight at that time. And just, it was second nature, some of those songs. And we were, I thought we were doing pretty well. To switch from that to something as aerobic as drums or chorus, I had a really hard time with that. I wasn't in drum shape. I didn't have a drum kit. So we were kind of at the mercy of the strike. We kind of lucked out, because a lot of the shows we Stripe was on tour, so we were on a lot of shows with Stripe, and we knew those guys, and we were friends with them, and they were, with open arms, just, oh God, of course, Sid was like, of course, use my drums, and he was cool. Everybody was cool, but I just wasn't in shape, and I just felt like I knew then, I know now, I was the weak link in playing those shows, and it just felt like some people on the East Coast had expectations for what the chorus was going to be. And those first couple of shows, I was such a weak link that I felt like we didn't bring it. And I was a little insecure about it. By about the third show, we started to turn it on. And then, we played Josh Grable's basement with Snapcase, and we were firing on not all cylinders, but 7 out of 8. And then by the time we played with it was Earth Crisis, Strife, and Snapcase in Syracuse, and I think we were doing all right at that point. And then our last show was with 108 in Washington D.C., and we were I thought we did really well as that tour wound up.
Then do you do an official breakup when you get back, or does it just fizzle? Because I think I saw you. I remember you did a reunion show at the Showcase, so there was obviously a breakup at some point.
No, it wasn't really a breakup. It's just, that was the end of '94, and I had 2 more years of law school that I had to leave for. So it's just I just didn't live in California. So Regis and Isaac, and Jason Hampton. You know Jason Hampton?
Yeah. Outspoken.
Yeah. Hampton. Love Hampton. Hampton played with Regis and Isaac, and then PTQ, I think, played drums. And they started something called CASTE, CASTE. And I want to say they recorded maybe 2 songs, like a 2-song demo. There's one song that is just freaking phenomenal. I don't know that it ever got released, maybe on like a compilation tape or a compilation of something. But they started kind of doing something called CASTE. And I was in Omaha, Nebraska, jamming with some ska band called Jimmy Scaffa. There's a hardcore band called Clayface out there. Jam with those guys from time to time. But it was never an official breakup, but just geographically, I mean, there was just an understanding. Banks is going to be in Omaha for the next 2 years. That's so there we are. There, and then there were times I'd come home like Thanksgiving, and we played a warehouse show with Dead Skin Mask and just some guys from Washington State were down with Dead Skin Mask. I think Strife might have played, so it was stuff like that. But it was always kind of because he'd show up, didn't have a drummer. Let's play it. I'd play drums. I haven't played drums in 6 months, and we'd play, and it was fun, and people would get into it. But it wasn't like I never felt great about it,
Right. So
no official breakup.
So what I'm remembering of like a showcase reunion, was it not a reunion? That was just one of the times you came back and you guys played a show?
Well, I was a couple of different showcase shows that I recall. I think I came back and moved to Vegas in '96, and I want to say there was a showcase show in like '97.
Right, that would have been what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, and it wasn't. I guess you'd call it a reunion in the sense that we hadn't played in a couple of years, but it wasn't a reunion in the sense that we broke up and now we're reuniting. It was just, let's play kind of a thing.
Yeah,
and
just in my mind, that show was huge.
Yeah, it was huge.
Okay,
it was awesome. Yeah, it was great. And we had. This guy, Bevel Aqua, he was from back east, and we had stayed at his house when we were on tour back east, but he had relocated out to the West Coast. He was a drummer. And he learned the songs with Regis, and, so he kind of knew, I was able to come in and the guy knew the songs and we were able to play them, and then there was another time when Steve Instead stood in for us. That was at the Whiskey with Ignite and I think Death by Stereo and Strife. And, so it was always nice when there was a drummer who knew how to play the drums that, we could come in and play. And that '97 show was one of those kinds of situations where we had some we were able to kind of front load a drummer. And then I was able to come in and I could always play all the songs on guitar. And Regis and Isaac and the drummer could kind of practice and get things tight that way. So
right.
I felt much better about those showcase shows.
Yeah. I think I remember you might have played like an AF show at the Whiskey, but I don't remember. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
And then, so after that, is there a breakup, or again, you just kind of go on hiatus and then that's a wrap? Kind of.
It's always hiatus, baby. It's always been hiatus.
So
it's
come back next
never
year.
Been, yeah. Fingers crossed that something kind of presents itself. Yeah, there was some time when I think Hartsfield did something in 2005 at the showcase. We played that, and it was awesome. And that was, A18 was up and running by that time.
Sure.
Oh God, A18. I love A18. Anyways, yeah. So it never an official breakup. Nobody has ever had the guts to come out and say we're breaking up. But what usually leads to a breakup? I guess you just kind of go your separate ways. But truth be told, none of us, we haven't ever truly gone our separate ways. We're all still friends, and we all are still in constant communication.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you moved to Vegas and you've done various musical acts out there. Do you want to just brush briefly on some of the stuff that connected with you?
Yeah, sure. I guess it would have been about 2013. My children were born in 04 and 06. So I wasn't doing very much musically other than, maybe playing guitar here and there, doing an occasional chorus show. But I just kind of, I don't know, man, I just kind of got the itch, started sniffing around, and I started jamming with this guy, John Stevenson, who had played in the band Don't Know from Huntington Beach. He had relocated out here. So I wrote a couple songs with him, but as luck would have it, he left. And then I answered a Craigslist ad for a band called Civilians. And it was kind of a street punk, kind of an oi band. And I took a lot of those songs, or a few of those songs that I had written, into that band. But I was more, at first, kind of a hired gun to play guitar. And, they just kept kind of asking me back. And next thing I know, I'm becoming friends with these guys. And they're just a great group of guys. The one guy had played, he was from Scotland originally. His name's Truland, and he had played in the Brass Knuckle Boys in the Midwest, in Oklahoma and those areas. And then the drummer Gilbert was in that band Youth Gone Mad, like old school LA band. So I was relieved when I went to jam with these guys, and I wasn't like 25 years older than them. But we had a lot of common touchstones, and they had lived in California, and we had been at a lot of the same shows, and it all just kind of very naturally came along. Next thing I know, we've got we're playing these shows, and the drummer or the bass player Jeremy is writing songs, and we're recording albums. We did one album, recorded it, released it ourselves, and then we did a split with the Defenders, who are out of Santa Cruz, on Crowd Control Media. We did a split 12-inch with those guys, and then we've been on some Vegas compilations and stuff. We did a Thin Lizzy cover on a Vegas 77 tribute comp, and I don't know, probably played 100 shows maybe with that band. And then I also play guitar in a Coxsparrow tribute band called Moxsparer. So that's
great.
That's fantastic. So that's a lot of fun too.
Yeah.
But yeah, we played some pretty good stuff. They have a mod scooter rally here in Vegas every year, where you get people from all over the world, and we've managed to play that a couple of times. So we get kind of a international crowd, meet a lot of cool folks, and it's a whole new style of music and guitar that I've learned. So they've been very patient with me, teaching me the ropes on how to play a lot of that stuff. But yeah, it's been awesome. It's been great.
Yeah, super cool. I mean, it's just good to know that you're still playing music, right?
Yeah. Now my kids have started a hardcore band. So we've got a studio in the living room, and they turn it up, and so it's great.
So cool. Well, Jeff, I really appreciate you coming on and taking your time to do this interview.
I appreciate it, Zach. I mean, like I say, man, to be mentioned in the same breath with with the Ron Bairds of the world. I really appreciate you considering me.
Cool. Do you feel like you've been well represented?
Indeed, I do, and I appreciate your questions. And I got to tell you, man, there will be questions to be asked of some of the folks that you're interviewing, and I will be on the tip of my tongue, and you invariably ask the follow-up question that's on my mind. I love your podcast. I think it's great.
Well, I appreciate that. I try to do my homework the best I can, but this medium is pretty hard. I'm learning every time.
Hey, I've got a quick Olympic Auditorium story I'd like to tell you.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. 1987, my dad takes me and my brother to see Hulk Hogan defend his belt against Adrian Adonis at the Olympic Auditorium.
Yeah.
So we're there, and it's going freaking insane, right? It's absolutely insane. And Tony Atlas is on the card. Atlas wins his match. I just don't remember who he fought. And there he leaves, some other matches. And just before the Hogan match, the guy gets in the ring on the microphone and shushes the crowd. I mean, it's packed and it's a wrestling show. He shushes the crowd and says, "Whoever's driving a gray Lincoln, such and such license plate," he rattles it off, says, "Could you please move it? Tony Atlas needs to get to the airport and you're blocking his car."
Well,
So,
hopefully it wasn't your dad's car and you missed the Hogan match.
no, it wasn't my dad's car. But anyway, I remember that more than the Hogan match. It's just, to bring a wrestling match down to complete quiet to announce that one of the principal's cars is blocked in, it was, that was wrestling at the Olympic Auditorium. So there you go.
Yeah, the only time I saw wrestling at the Olympic was when ECW came out the one time, that Philadelphia organization. But my dad took me to see Hulk Hogan fought the one-man gang at Ventura Fairgrounds. It would have been 88, I think. And that would have been my first time going. So that was fun. That's all I can remember. Other than Ted DiBiase beat the Junkyard Dog. And but that's about it. I was only 8. So I'm 40 now. But yeah.
Well, I learn with wrestling is sometimes I enjoy watching other people watch wrestling as much as I enjoy watching wrestling. So
I'm not a fan anymore. But hey, at age 20 and under, I enjoyed it. So
sure.
Yeah. Well,
I thought of you. I wanted to tell you that.
No, I know. I'm glad you did. That was great, and I really appreciate your time, Jeff.
Thank you very much, Zach. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.